Is there any other juicy rumours going around at Forest that you're hearing with any other players at all, mate?
Albeit Milan are speaking like they want a minimum of 20 million euros. That's about 15 million quid. It might even be closer, 25 million euros. But
I can touch on the players coming in, mate. We've just signed Milenkovic, who looks like a cracking deal at about £12 million. What we're hearing a lot of in the fan base and the discussion is about his salary. I know it sounds weird, but this one's doing the rounds. There's talks that we're paying him some ridiculous money, like 110k a week, and that's why he decided to come to Forest. Do you have any knowledge about how much his salary is looking currently?
yeah, I think salary-wise, the wage he's on doesn't make him the top earner at Forest or necessarily anywhere close. My understanding is that his net gain will be something in the region of 40k. And that is a great wage for you and for me, but we're not talking about Forest necessarily breaking their wage structure so dramatically that it would raise eyebrows. But one thing's for sure is this is a player that Forest are really excited about, and I think the fan base are as well.
Yes.
12 million feels like a steal for the Serbia centre-back. It's a 5-year contract, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And he complements Murillo perfectly. He's tremendous in the air. That's the first thing to say, and can have an impact in both boxes. But he's also quite deft with his feet. And it's very rare. It's very modern, but it's very rare to have a kind of centre-back who is big, physical, and at the same time is ball playing. And everything I've seen about him would suggest that he would take very easily and quickly to the Premier League. So this should be a very positive signing as far as Forest are concerned. And it will make them, I think, even more bullish, like I said earlier, to keep hold of Murillo, because you're not just looking at a centre-back as an individual entity, you're looking at where they fit in your back line. And Milenkovic, Murillo, M&M, as somebody might name them, I'm sure.
I've been lining that one up.
Great partnership.
Yeah, but is it true that we were hearing rumours that Spurs were interested, Villa were interested, and I think West Ham was the other name there? Was there much interest in him outside of Forest?
Yeah, I mean, he was very much in demand, and I think you're right in some of the clubs that you mentioned. I'm not so sure about Spurs because from their perspective, the centre-back position is not yet the priority, but West Ham took a look for sure. Dortmund also were one of the other clubs that made an inquiry, to my knowledge. So Forest have done really well to get this type of player, and because we're not dealing with a early 20s player, you're bringing someone in right at their peak. And that's the kind of Forest strategy at this point. So with other clubs, perhaps we see more of a push towards getting early 20s, or in Chelsea's case, teenagers. But you're bringing in somebody that's played nearly 350 games in his career at the age of 26. And one of the things Forest liked about him, in addition to the qualities that I've already outlined, is just the fact that throughout pretty much all of his career, he stayed relatively fit. I think he played 50 games in all competitions last season. And I can't think of many of the last 4 or 5 seasons, or pretty much all of his Fiorentina career, to my knowledge anyway, where he was out for any significant period of time. And that's very useful when you sign a player and you have that confidence that they're going to have longevity and that they're going to be able to input throughout what might be a very long season. And then the other thing that we saw, not so much last season actually, but I think this will hopefully change from Forest's perspective, but throughout his Fiorentina career, he chipped in with a fair few goals as well. I remember in, I think it was 1920 or 2021, he got 4 or 5 league goals in 35 odd appearances. And most of his Fiorentina career saw him chip in with 3, 4, 5 goals. Last season, I don't actually remember him scoring, but generally he can have an impact in both boxes as well. So you got somebody that is at a peak age, a player for the now, is 6'5", so a lot of height, is still deft with his feet, is powerful in the air, can have an impact in both boxes, and complements the other likely starting centre-back that you've got. So this all bodes very well for Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, you get me excited, mate. You get me excited. One that started to do the rounds now, Ben, is Ismail Sarr, the ex-Watford player. There's been links to him with Forest, but I don't know if you've heard anything at all about it. Is there much truth in this one?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of at the moment. I think this is a player actually that Nottingham Forest looked at quite some time ago, and that's
When we
maybe
got
what is,
promoted, yeah.
yeah, and that's maybe what is creating the same type of rumor mongering at this point. My understanding with Ismail Assar is that it's Crystal Palace that are the ones to
Right.
watch. And from Marseille's point of view, they are willing to at least have a conversation. And Sarr only joined Marseille from Watford last summer.
Yeah.
And he did okay. I think he got 4 or 5 goals. He played in 30, 35 type games. But Crystal Palace, much more so than Nottingham Forest,
Okay.
of lights are not just from his time at Marseille or Watford, but all the way back to when he was playing in France with Rennes. And they've had him on the radar ever since. And they feel that now is the time to move. So I think Palace, if he is to make a move from Marseille, and they might want to cash in because they've spent a lot of money. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is just about to join on a loan with an obligation for 20 million euros total package. Mason Greenwood's come in. And from Marseille's point of view, even though it's not the 40 million that Manchester United wanted up front, it's still a big outlay. So they may be prepared to sell. But I think if he's to return to England, then it's Palace, not Forest, to watch.
That's good with me. I don't want him. I don't want him too much.
Fair
But
enough.
one I do like is the AC Milan player Alexis. I'm gonna butcher his name. Saelemaker, along those lines. There's been a lot of talk over the last week or so about a few clubs that are after him, and Forest's name has cropped up. Is there substance behind this rumor at all, from what you're hearing?
Yeah, there is some substance here. So suitors that have inquired quite like the price. That's the first thing to say. Albeit Milan are speaking like they want a minimum of 20 million euros. That's about 15 million quid. It might even be closer, 25 million euros. But when you're buying a player for the Premier League at that kind of price, it's still a relatively modest investment, which just sort of shows you how inflated the market is. And along with Nottingham Forest, who have made an inquiry to my knowledge, you've got West Ham and Leicester, my club as well. And even Ipswich
Was
quite
it
like
true
the
you
player.
put a bid in? There was rumours saying you'd put a 10 mil bid in at Leicester. Was there any truth
Yeah,
behind that?
I think Leicester made a verbal offer in inverted commas. And sometimes these verbal offers, especially if they're rejected, get very quickly denied. We're seeing the same with Manuel Ugarte, where Manchester United placed a verbal offer. It was way below the valuation. And then suddenly Manchester United sources say they never placed an offer, but PSG sources say there was an offer. And all you can really do as a journalist is try and reflect both sides when there's that much of a contradiction. But at this stage, Leicester have not met, nor do they plan to meet, the valuation. And that puts them at a disadvantage. We wait and see whether Nottingham Forest are prepared to do the same kind of fee that Milan are looking for. I think at this stage, let's sort of see if Leicester reassess the situation. And it might be, from Leicester's point of view in particular, that instead of putting their efforts and targets and money on Matthias Sule, who they've been trying to get from Roma, but he wants to go elsewhere, they might come back in and they might decide to put a bit more of their money and efforts and time on Saelemaekers instead. But my knowledge of the situation at the moment is that the player's not given anyone an answer, any kind of preference, other than the fact that he's open to a Premier League move. So Nottingham Forest haven't placed a bid yet, to my knowledge. I know some people say that they have. That's not my understanding at this stage, that they haven't actually tested any of the resolve at this point. And, 10 million quid is not so derisory from Leicester's point of view, because that's about, 15 million euros. Milan want 20 million plus. It's not that far apart. So Leicester kind of walked away, looked at other people, and now might return. I don't think Ipswich will enter the race. They've spent a lot of money, and I think they were looking a bit earlier in the window. So Forest could come back to this one, and it would be a very good signing. I would also keep an eye on West Ham United, because I think they're quite serious as well about seeing whether there's a deal to be struck too.
They seem to just copy our transfer list, shopping list. I mean, honestly, West Ham get linked to so many of the players we are. Final one I want to ask you about is the Brazilian kid from Palmeiras, Riquelme. There's been talks. There's been a £5 million bid put in from Forest. Firstly, is that correct to your understanding?
Yeah, I think Nottingham Forest are in talks, and they've indicated that they either plan to bid or formally will bid 5 million. Everything at the time we're recording has been verbal, to my understanding, and Forest are really confident on this one. And, it might sound like we've spoken for a while and people just want to know who are we signing, who are we signing. The one thing I would say before we go into detail is they'd signed quite a lot already in the early part of the window. So it's been a productive window for Forest. So you wouldn't expect them to be bringing in 4, 5, 6 more names. It's probably more likely that you're looking to finesse now with 2 or 3. Riquelme falls into a different category because he's naturally one for the future at only 17 years of age. But by being 17 years of age, he can't be signed until he turns 18, which I believe is in September. So this would be for January, not for now. But Nottingham Forest looking to jump ahead of the market and get something pre-agreed now, partly because they believe that this 17-year-old winger can actually have an impact within the senior squad, both for now and for the future, and partly because they want to jump ahead of the market because they know that there's plenty of other people that are looking at him very closely. So I think there's a really quite strong chance that this one gets done. I know from talking to sources that Nottingham Forest are optimistic. He has been excellent when I've seen him play for Brazil. He won I think it was South American under-17 championship last year, and he scored a couple in that tournament as well. And what you'll notice if he signs is your sort of typical Brazilian things, I suppose. Loves to carry the ball, shock horror, a winger from Brazil who likes to dribble, but he's incredibly, incredibly fast as well, both with his feet and with his mind as well. Where he needs to improve, and sources say he's working on, is within his movement off the ball and his finishing. And he's aware that his development so far has been to try and turn him into something a bit more versatile. So he started out as a winger and predominantly on the left side. And over time in the last few years, they're starting to push him more into that centre forward or even false 9 position. And of course, when you've been a winger and you've thought run, cross, run, cut inside, shoot from the edge of the box, etc., like all winners do, it's actually quite clear because you've got more of a defined role. You're stretching defenders, you're using your pace. As soon as you get moved centrally, you naturally get more chances. And if you don't put them away, people think that you're all sort of flair, but you lack that kind of substance to put the ball in the back of the net. So he's been working very hard on his finishing. And if you look, albeit at an under-20s level with Palmeiras, he basically gets a goal every 2 games. And this is what Forest have seen in the development that they now believe is worth the investment. So I would say Forest are favourites at the moment in terms of a relatively large array of interest. 3 months ago, Bayern sent scouts to watch the player. Brighton have taken a little look in the past as well, but they've moved on to other targets. Lazio were another club that were really into him for a small period of time. But the Forest efforts at the moment are relatively advanced. And there is a fair chance, therefore, that this one gets done for a fee somewhere in the region of 5 million, probably with a sell-on clause to Palmeiras as well.
Yeah, interesting. Is there any other juicy rumours going around at Forest that you're hearing with any other players at all, mate?
The only one that I've heard, which is quite interesting, I'm not sure, you'll probably know better than me how much of a need there is per se, but Luka Sučić is one that Forest quite like, who is at Red Bull at the moment and only with a year left of his contract at Red Bull Salzburg rather than Leipzig. And because the contract is running out and there's no sign to my knowledge of any extension to date, it might be the case that the 21-year-old has to move on now. Otherwise, there's a danger that he leaves on a free transfer.
Right.
And he's one of those sort of players that I'd classify him as a playmaker, but because he's kind of quite tall and imposing and tenacious, he can be a bit more of that like old school, bog standard central midfielder used in a more rigid kind of role. If we date back to maybe when he was 19 or 20 and he was bursting on the scene, the likes of Liverpool and Newcastle were all looking at him. Fulham have taken a little look in this window as well. And Milan quite like the player too. So that could be one to watch between now and the end of the window. I'm not saying it's anything advanced at this point, but Forest are one of those clubs that are just trying to understand if there's a bargain there to be had because of the fact that the player's contract expires in 12 months' time.
Fantastic. Final question from me. Who finishes higher, Forest or Leicester?
Ooh, do I have to factor in hypothetical points deductions?
Oh,
that
yes, of course. Yeah.
I think Forest, and let's not tell the Leicester fan base that I said that. My fear for Leicester is the fact that Enzo Maresca and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall have both gone. And of course, Steve Cooper, a manager that you know very well, has come in. And I like that hire. My preference very marginally might have been for Graham Potter. But what I like about Cooper is that if Leicester went down, I don't think he's the kind of manager that Leicester would say, right, you've gone down, so you're gone. Or Cooper's the kind of manager that would say, Leicester go down, so he's going to go. So if Leicester, because their financial situation and losing their manager, went down, but then came back up and were stronger, I would still sort of expect Cooper to be there. And as pessimistic as that sounds, I quite like that. And I also think that he's got enough Premier League know-how and experience. But my worry is that the style Maresca played at Leicester was so rigid, possession-based. And of course, when you're winning in the Championship, you have that dominance because Leicester were like the top team. Then you go up to the Premier League and your manager either changes that style, which is probably likely under Cooper, so then you've not got any continuity, or alternatively, you stick with that style. But how can you have that style? Because Leicester are not going to have 60, 70% of the ball. They're going to have 30% of the ball in the Premier League. So it's a lot of changes. And then I look at the start to the season and we begin against Spurs, who have always done very well playing Leicester. We got Villa early. We've got Arsenal early. We got Derby against Forest, I think, in October. We got to play Man United and Chelsea before Christmas. So if they don't get off to a fast start and then they were to get a points deduction, which the feeling within the industry is that's relatively likely at some point during the season, it becomes problematic. Forest, I think, are the opposite in a weird way because it kind of feels like under Nuno, and I don't mean dramatically, but they're a bit more attack orientated. It looks like they've got a few more goals in them. They've got that continuity. They've made some smart signings, particularly as we mentioned in the defence. And if they can maximise against what you told me off air is Bournemouth, a bogey side, Southampton and Wolves, if they can maximise those first three games, go and take 7 points from those first three games, it just sets you up for the season. And then I look at kind of Forest's opening fixtures, and no fixture's easy in the Premier League, but to have Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves, there's Liverpool, Brighton a little bit hit and miss. Who knows what they're going to be like in the post-De Zerbi era. You got Forest, I think, at home. And then the likes of Leicester and Palace and West Ham. I don't think there's many of the big six that really come and play Forest until that November period. So there's a real opportunity to potentially before Christmas put at least, let's just call it 20 points in the bag. So you're halfway towards the 40 that you need. So that's the long kind of rambly answer. And the short answer is that I can sort of see Forest pushing towards that 10th place. And I feel like Leicester are going to linger between 15th and 20th, depending on how big the points deduction is.
The points is, You're getting me excited for the season. Listen, Ben, I know you're a busy bloke and we've taken up loads of your time. So I just want to thank you for the time and just remind the audience, go make sure you're following Ben on Twitter. He does, how regularly are the streams now on playback, mate? Is it rigid yet or quite loose?
Yeah, the playback stream started really well, and then I went to America, and now I'm waking up, and it's the end of the day for everyone else. So they will start again the next few days. It's 3 times a week on playback, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then a Q&A on Sunday, which is a bit more quick fire. And in addition to that, there is my regular stuff. So my writing is with Gimme Sport. My broadcasting is with TalkSport. I'll be doing Premier League commentaries all season. So hopefully plenty of Premier League games as far as Forest is concerned. And I'll be down for that Leicester Forest game as well, which is relatively early in the season. So looking forward to that.
Fantastic. You're an absolute legend. Guys, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And hopefully we can do this again with you, Ben, later on in the season and update on any changes.
Yeah, I'll come back on if Leicester beat Forest. I won't come on ever again if Forest beat Leicester.
Yeah, we won't. You won't be welcome if that happens. But guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. And come on, you Reds.